Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Echo from the Buttes. I am your host, David Howman, joined as always by Tom Harden and Andrew Hazlett, who right before we started recording was swinging in circles around on his swivel chair that he's on and having the time of his life. So we're all excited. We're all happy to be back on and talking all things Arizona State athletics. There's a lot going on. We're pivoting to a different part of the calendar. Of course, men's and women's basketball is coming down the stretch of the season. We've got hockey also, that's going on. And we're about to start the baseball season as well. Softball just started. They're getting off to a hot start. So a time of change, a time of transitioning in the college athletics calendar. Of course, it was also...
season is here.
What's that?
Crossover season is officially here.
Crossover season is officially here. We're also crossing over from the NFL football season into the NFL draft season. Of course, there were 4 Arizona State players who were invited to the combine on Wednesday. That was made official. On Sunday, of course, there was no game. We all know that. There's no such thing as a Super Bowl, Tom. We won't. Do you have any comments to make?
Yeah, I was just happy the Patriots were there, playing with house money. Seattle was the much better team. I tip my cap to them 100%. No ill feelings about the outcome of Sunday's game.
Taken like a somebody who's witnessed 15 rings or so in his lifetime already.
I run out of fingers and toes to put them on. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, it's at this point it's all house money, I guess. I can't really relate to that, but it must be nice. Of course, right now, like I mentioned, basketball is we're getting close. It's middle of February. March is coming up. March Madness. Arizona State's men's basketball team may not be there, but the season is. There will be madness. The season is going about as people expected it to, although they did get a bit of an upset win over Oklahoma State on Tuesday night, which was I definitely did not expect that. I don't know about you guys, but Arizona State out-rebounded Oklahoma State, which is significant enough in itself, especially after their previous game. Bobby Hurley kind of went viral for blowing up at a reporter who had asked, they asked, how do you're getting out rebounded this much by this margin in all these games, how do you fix that? And Bobby was kind of like, well, we only got this many games left. If we haven't fixed it by now, we're not going to fix it. And then the next game they came out and fixed it. So I guess I think Bobby's figured it out, is that he has to just absolutely trash talk both his players and the reporters in order for them to go out and play well in the next one.
And I think in his opening statement too, Curley said something about out rebounding Oklahoma State that might have been kind of a continuation of last week's comments.
And it just means that in the next after every win, no matter what, after every game, even if it's a win, just find some way to trash somebody. That's going to light a fire under this team, so it seems.
Yeah, apparently that's what it takes, because there was also a couple of weeks ago where he said something like, "I'm failing and I can't get through to this team," and then they came out the next game and they won. I forget who it was that they beat, but there's been so many wins that it's hard to keep them all straight. So, but it clearly is like he's figured out how to get through to them. It's just to be awful to them. But yeah, things are not necessarily looking bright for ASU men's basketball. But we got a couple weeks left in the regular season and then the Big 12 tournament, and you never know. All you got to do is win the Big 12 tournament, and you get to go to the dance. Who here wants to call their shot on that happening?
Not me.
All right, Andrew, you've given us some bold takes on this show.
They will lose at some point.
At some point, he qualifies.
Okay. Could mean the title game.
Yeah, it could. It also could be game one.
Yeah. You know, they're not actually the worst team in the Big 12 right now. Utah right now is 1-10 in the Big 12 play. Kansas State's 1-9, and then for some reason Baylor is 3-9. Of course,
Wow.
they've been a really good program for a while now, and they're obviously having a down year. But yeah, who would have thought that we'd be saying Arizona State's ahead of Baylor in the Big 12 standings, and they're and they're not doing good. So they're definitely not. They're definitely not the worst team. And honestly, a lot of these losses, very few of these losses are just absolute blowouts. Like, they do keep it competitive. They do have legitimate talent on the team. It's just they have good stretches and they can't put it all together. And obviously, it doesn't help that the Big 12 is the premier basketball conference. But even against some of these other teams, some of the teams in the middle of the pack, they're not able to consistently get wins against those teams. They should be, in reality, a little bit higher up in the Big 12 standings, and they're not. And that's one of several reasons why there may or may not be a coaching search going on while everybody else is, seeing where they are at in the brackets.
I've said it a couple times before on this show. A lot of these games that are these close losses, UCF in particular stands out to me, and I've called it a case of the Bobbies, where this team is just, they're firing on all cylinders for maybe the first, call it, 2/3 to 3/4 of the game, but then from the 10-minute mark of the second half on, it's just kind of like they forget which way the basket is, metaphorically speaking, and the UCF game in particular, I think the lead was a double-digit lead in the second half, and then you lose by 3. Like that, it's those kind of frustrating losses that show you that the pieces are there. It's just either the team doesn't have the legs to be able to play the full 40 minutes, which is concerning in itself, or the game plan only works for so long before it turns into a pumpkin and skids to a stop. I'm inclined to say that the game plan just works until it doesn't. I think that this team is able to compete for a full 40 minutes. We've seen that with the win over Oklahoma State just this past week. We've seen that in, granted it was at the expense of a lower ranked Utah team, but saw a big lead start to dwindle, got down to, I think it was a 4 or 6 point margin before Arizona State held on for the 8-point win. It's not all doom and gloom as much as it looks like, but the end is near for the Bobby era, no matter how many wins this team gets down the stretch.
Yeah, and it's last year was not a great year for them. This year, it seems probable, maybe not likely, but they could finish with a better conference record than they did last year. That's still very much in play for them, but also it's an admittedly low bar to be better than they were last year in terms of conference record. And I think we're all in agreement that there's going to be a new coach. You don't have Bobby Hurley coach into the final year of his contract, have this kind of season, and then say, well, let's bring him back. My question, and I'm going to put you guys on the spot, but who do you want to take such an opening if there were such an opening?
Andrew, I'll let you take this one first.
Like who's the Kenny Dillingham of men's basketball? Who's the Molly Miller of men's basketball?
You have voices in your head, and the voice in my head is saying Bobby Hurley Jr., the son of current Bobby Hurley, who's also the son of Bobby Hurley. So I guess this is Bobby Hurley the third, technically, but he is on the team. He is coaching in some capacity. He's young. He's exciting. He knows what it's like to be a Sun Devil. that does technically check all the boxes off, but serious answer, I don't know. I don't know who would want to accept this job. I don't know who's going to be available. If you can get the Miami coach of Ohio, that would be nice. That's one coach that comes to mind for me.
For me, one coach that comes to mind, not sure what would, one, if he would be available, or two, what it would take to make him available. But Randy Bennett at St. Mary's, Mesa native, so he's got the Arizona ties here. He's been, he knows what, what Arizona State basketball is. He knows what the culture around Arizona State athletics is. Again, not sure what his availability would be, but just the success that he's had with St. Mary's in the West Coast Conference, that's an intriguing possibility from my perspective.
I'm really glad that you brought Randy Bennett up, because that was going to be the guy that I mentioned. And I'll tell you this about Randy Bennett is when Arizona State first moved on from Herb Sendek, when they were looking and they all obviously ended up hiring Bobby Hurley, Randy Bennett had expressed interest in the job at that time. And, obviously they went a different direction, but he has made it known over the years that it's a job that he would be interested in. Like you said, he's a Mesa, Arizona native. He's not really that far away at St. Mary's geographically. He does get a lot of players out of Arizona who have turned into really productive players for him. Only thing is he's 63 years old. He's had a lot of success at St. Mary's. So but if you're looking for a Kenny Dillingham type, a Molly Miller type, somebody who's young, got their whole future ahead of him, and is just a ball of energy, all due respect to Randy Bennett, he doesn't check that box. But he's somebody that if you can get him in, he immediately brings credibility. Also, his associate head coach at St. Mary's goes by the name of Mickey McConnell, and he also is from Mesa. He played at Dobson and then played for Randy Bennett at St. Mary's. And you could definitely imagine a scenario where you get Randy Bennett and Mickey McConnell kind of in a 2-for-1 deal, with Mickey being the heir apparent. Mickey is only 36 years old, so somebody who all he's ever done as a player and as a coach is be in that Randy Bennett system. You can get Randy Bennett at the end of his career, give him Big 12 resources, and then kind of transition into the Mickey McConnell era. I think there's a really good pitch there. I also think the other name that I'll throw out there, if he's available, is the current Oklahoma head coach, Porter Moser, somebody who had a big run with Loyola Chicago back in the day and had a huge March Madness run, and then parlayed that into the Oklahoma job. And a lot of people expected him to just come in and immediately be super successful at Oklahoma. And things haven't quite gone according to plan. And I think a lot of that has to do with just unrealistic expectations for the OU basketball program. I think that, you have a guy like Buddy Hield and a guy like Trae Young, and they just think, well, we're just always going to have those guys. And that's not, those guys are definitely the exception to the rule for OU basketball. That's not really, they're not necessarily known for their basketball. OU is always going to prioritize football, and I think that's been something that Porter Moser's run into. But at a program like Arizona State, I think that he's, not that ASU is going to prioritize basketball over football, but it's going to be more comparable in terms of resources relative to expectations to what he had at Loyola Chicago, rather than OU, where they're not giving him the resources to be a national title contender, but they're still expecting him to be a national title contender. So that's somebody that would be on my radar early, is Porter Moser.
I'm going to throw out one last off the wall possibility. Do you think Brett Rossini goes back to the GCU well and fishes Bryce Drew out of that well after 1 year with the Lopes?
Zero chance. Zero chance, because his brother coaches at Baylor, and I don't think he'll want to coach against his brother.
Hey, it was just a wild thought. You never know.
it's valid. I get
We
the,
are talking about upcoming madness. What more madness than that?
for a long time, I wanted somehow to get Archie Miller when Sean Miller was coaching at the other program down in Arizona. And for the same reason, it would never have happened. And, looking back now, obviously a good thing that it didn't happen either. He didn't have such a great run at Indiana. But, yeah, those kinds of things, brothers typically aren't going to join the same conference as each other. And I don't think it would necessarily be a home run hire either, but I like the thought.
So that's why UConn hasn't joined the Big 12 yet.
Exactly. That is the only reason. Is
Dan doesn't want the Bobby smoke.
Yeah, Dan knows how that would go. Nobody's more afraid of Arizona State than UConn.
Imagine two Hurleys just coaching against each other in one basketball game. What would it be like to be an official for that?
It would be very loud.
Can we just have that as an exhibition, and have that be Bobby's swan song? Be like, what, coach one game against your brother, and then bye.
Yeah, I'm down. I'm okay with that. Of course, on the flip side is the women's basketball program, and we're talking about trying to find the next Kenny Dillingham, trying to find the next Molly Miller, and that's an indication of how the women's team is doing. And, honestly, they've had a little bit of a return to reality since they started Big 12 play. It hasn't been bad by any stretch, but they're very much in the middle of the Big 12 food chain right now. Looking at the standings, they're, I think, let's see, I think that they're ninth. No, they're 10th right now. Pretty much neck and neck with BYU, Kansas State, and Iowa State. They've had some games where they've just, quite frankly, they've blown it against inferior teams. Then they've had games where they were able to beat Oklahoma State, who right now is 5th in the Big 12. They lost by only 3 to Baylor, who is leading the conference right now, even ahead of TCU and West Virginia, who've both been phenomenal all season. So they've shown, even while they haven't been able to pull out wins consistently as they did in the non-conference, they've shown they still have that grit, they still have that spunk, and they're capable of winning against almost anybody. And as we wind down the season, they're kind of on bubble watch. I don't think they're necessarily firmly on the bubble, but they're definitely in danger of missing out on the tournament, but within striking distance as well, which is still, when you think about this program the last few seasons, leaps and bounds from what it had been, and makes it very easy to understand why when we look at a coaching search in men's basketball, we're all talking about, well, where's Graham Rossini going to find the next Molly Miller?
I'm looking at the bracketology for women's basketball right now, and the Lady Sun Devils are viewed as one of the last 4 teams in, projected to be matching up against looks like possibly, well, I don't know, does the women's tournament also do the first 4 like the men's tournament now? Looks like they're set to match up against Clemson in that 11 matchup, according to the latest bracketology on CBS Sports. So I think they're firmly on the bubble. It's just what side of the bubble do they come out on with the rest of the regular season and conference tournament play.
Right. Well, and they've got games coming up against some worthy opponents too. They still have to play Iowa State. They have to play Texas Tech, who has come out of nowhere. They were picked to finish second to last in the conference in the preseason, and as we're recording right now, they sit at 3rd in the Big 12. So if Arizona State can beat either of those teams, at the very least, if they lose to just one of those, but it's a close loss like it was against Baylor, that's going to help their resume. I think when you watch this team and you see how they play, especially against top opponents, they're exactly the kind of team you want in the tournament, just because they're capable of getting an upset over anybody. They're always going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be a good game. With the exception of TCU, they don't get blown out. And that TCU loss was on the road. TCU has been absolutely unstoppable at home this year. They're 15-0 at home, so only undefeated team at home in the Big 12, which is saying something. So I think Arizona State has a really good chance right now to be put in simply by the virtue of they're the exact type of team that you want to have in this kind of setting.
You're talking about the home records in the conference. Arizona State's right there at 13-1 in conference play at home, and again, as we're recording right now, the Lady Devils are up 41-39 on Utah midway through the third quarter, defending home court as we speak. But yeah, it's this team I think does have a reasonable chance of making the tournament.
Yeah, and they have a reasonable chance, and there is still a chance for the other team that's winding down their season, Sun Devil hockey. Maybe not as great of a chance, but Tom, tell us a little bit about the Sun Devils on the ice.
Well, there was hockey played at Mullet Arena on this past Friday and Saturday night, hosting St. Cloud State. It was not the outcome that any of us were hoping for. The Sun Devils got swept by the Huskies, both games coming in regulation, and it really turned out to be just the entire season in a nutshell, especially on Saturday night. Sun Devils throughout the season, 11 of their losses have come when either tied or within a goal either way after 40 minutes of play. And we talked earlier about how Bobby Hurley's squad has not really been able to close out games. One can hope that he and hockey head coach Greg Powers are not sharing notes on their game plans, but you can chalk up some of this to injuries. We've talked at length about Jack Beck and Colin Potter being out, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more with our guests that will be coming on in just a few minutes. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, this team just has not been able to really execute when it matters. The game plan, there's brief flashes of brilliance there. I'm not going to deny that they haven't had the occasional pearls of games, but especially since Potter went down, the top line has been it's been a shock to the top line. Cruz Lucius was on a scoring streak. He had a 16-point streak that's ended. Bennett Shimmick is still plugging along, for his part, but it's kind of plug and play at this point. You're seeing Tucker Ness slot in at fourth line center, a defenseman who has been able to dress at a forward position in the past, but when you're listing him as a fourth line center, the depth that Coach Powers always talks about in his availabilities, to me, it's just not there. Andrew, is there any different way that we can spin that with having to dress a defenseman as a center?
I think it was there, but now the depth with 3 players departing and 2 more that are going to be out for the year and 1 more that's going to be out for this series in Western Michigan. That depth is here. You have to play everyone. Like, there's no other way around it. You have, unless you're putting Chase Hammett forward at this point, which I don't know if you can do that because he's listed as a goalie, you don't have anyone else at this point that can play. I don't know if it's plausible to say, hey, Austin Zemlak or Justin Cloutier, guys who have departed from the team, say, hey, do you want to come back? We need you. I don't even know if that's even possible with rules and regulations. So at this point, you don't have any other depth there. Your depth of guys like Braxton Whitehead, Tony Achille, Ty Nash, Tucker Ness, those guys are playing now due to all those departures, and it's evident that this team is a shell of what it once was.
And I think just the way that the bench gets shortened in these games as well, not consistently rolling all four lines, it's really a detriment to the overall potential that this team could have. You know, if you're getting a lot of great performance out of Sam Alfano. He's been really standing out to me as of late, but maybe the only way to get him that action is if he's resting on the second line rather than putting him on the fourth line and getting that fourth line consistent playing time.
Here's a crazy thought. Why not put Tucker Ness as first line center? Because the first line does need something to shake up. They've tried Smolin, they've tried McGurn at center. They really haven't done anything. So why not just throw the quote-unquote Mr. Excitement of this team in Tucker Ness, who can just bury people into the glass whenever he feels like it, on center? Because that line needs something to work. And if it's you've already tried two of your centers, why not throw Tucker Ness out there? What's the worst that could happen?
I believe it's as manager. As the manager in Angels in the Outfield once said, manager George Knox, what's the worst thing that happened? Fall out of last place. Which thankfully the Sun Devils are not in last place as of this moment. But a tough game or a tough series coming up at Western Michigan is not going to make the road any easier. Sitting only 1 point ahead of Omaha for that last place position. It's what's your ceiling for the Sun Devils for the rest of the season?
I was going to say, I think we're already at the ceiling, not to be Debbie Downer.
Yeah, it's tough for me to be so down on Sun Devil hockey, but I don't see a clear path to finishing above 8th place. I just don't see it out of this team. I don't see a strong game plan. I don't see this team getting traffic in front of the opposition's net. I also don't see clean net front defense in our own zone. And I see just way too many opportunities that get passed up when, especially in the O zone, when you're seeing guys make 3, 4, 5 extra passes. I've lost track of how many times I've seen Sean McGurn have the puck down in the low slot with an opportunity just to get the puck on goalie and still gets kicked out to the outside. Nothing bad has ever come from getting a puck on net.
Yeah, and Tom, to your point too. I mean, there's lots of things that have gone wrong with the team itself, like poor play, injuries. Of course, we've talked, endlessly about that. Lots of things wrong that Arizona State is doing that is preventing them from being able to win, but the schedule doesn't really do them any other favors either. And as we're winding things down too, like you said, this weekend, Western Michigan, and that's not a great matchup. That's not the team you want to face when you're trying to turn things around. And like you mentioned,
champions for a reason.
Yeah. Well, and like you mentioned, we have our guest coming on who is going to be our Western Michigan expert, who's going to be able to shed a little bit more light on that team, and so we'll take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll be able to talk with him and find out more about what awaits the Sun Devils this weekend.
We are joined here tonight by one of the co-hosts of Goal Horns and Fight Songs, Wes Painted Bronco, one of the Lawson Lunatics hailing from Kalamazoo. Wes, you're on with David, Andrew. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, nice to meet you guys. Really looking forward to the matchup. hoping to get some revenge for giving us our only regulation loss last season. So we'll see how the boys like coming to the zoo and playing in front of the Lost and Lunatics.
You know, that was a that was definitely a cherry on our season last year, making that getting that one regulation loss for you guys. But it's definitely a much different situation this year for both sides. One thing that I've been keenly watching throughout the year is Hampton Slukinski, and being the only goaltender this year to see any action, not having Cameron Rowe to split weekends with, and quite honestly, in my opinion, he's really been shaping up to be that top tier, number one goaltender. What have you been seeing from him?
Yeah, no, for sure. Westerns know they're not a mystery to having one goaltender. They've run one goaltender quite a few times. Brandon Bussey has ran an entire season as the primary goalie. Cameron Rowe, a couple seasons, primary goalie. In fact, the year before Hampton was here, he played every game for him. So they're used to running one goalie. Hampton's come a long way, for sure. I think I had some question marks as far as how he was in the crease at the beginning of the season. Even dating back to last year, he seemed to give up a lot of those greasy goals. If you could get to him in the crease, there was pucks that were there. He wasn't as strong on the puck as I thought he could have been or should have been. But, around Christmas break, something clicked, and he started being a lot more forceful when he was coming out to cover pucks, covering pucks, being a lot more active in attacking the puck as a goalie. Had that great winning streak, back-to-back shutouts against Notre Dame, who was a tough team. So even from weekend to weekend, he's still improving and is going to be a great goaltender in the future and for the LA Kings when he finally makes that step up to the pros.
You guys lose Tim Washy, you lose Alex Bump, the two major offensive weapons from last year's national championship team, but gain a big piece in William Lightlaw coming in through the transfer portal, Zachariah Wisdom coming in as well. Still have Owen Michaels, Samuel Sholand. The depth scoring to me, as I was doing my preview for Devils in Detail earlier today, that's something that really stands out about Western's roster top to bottom. And you mentioned off the air about if this team is able to score 4 goals in a game, that seems to be the magic number. What do you attribute that success with this roster turnover?
I think a lot of it just comes from the message that Pat Ferschweiler sends to all the players. He wants them to play with confidence. He wants them to be offensive. Go listen to any post-game show or pre-game show he does. Or talking about any players. He's like, players want to come here because they like playing offense. Everybody wants to play it. They say a strong defense is a good offense, and Western really tends to play that way. I do like that, a little bit of defensive responsibility is good to have, but, they don't keep players from jumping in the offensive zone if the opportunity presents itself. And I think that's why you see guys like Sammy Sholand have the offensive production they have from the blue line, or why we seem to produce a lot of pro defensemen anymore. Ronnie Addard was another guy who would stack numbers from the blue line. And so it's really just the message that First sends to the guys, and they run with it, and everyone plays a little bit more relaxed, I think, and not as stressed about what's happening. And then you have a goaltender like Hampton Slukinski behind him who, pretty regularly, if someone's alone on him, he's still making a save. And I think that gives the guys a lot of confidence, too, to play a little more aggressively, knowing he's back there and can bail them out from time to time.
I'll kick it over to Andrew here for anything that you have for Wes.
Yeah, my question is that you guys won the national championship this last year. This year, I think it's fair to say that you're on a similar pace, maybe a little bit worse off with North Dakota being a contender up in the NCHC as well. What's different from last year's team to this year's team, where this team seems to me at least like a quarter step off of what they were last year?
To me, I think it's a lot of the experience that we had last year. We had a lot of older leadership in Tim Washy, Cam Knuble, Wyatt Shingothi, and we had those 5-year guys who took advantage of that COVID year, who were freshmen throughout. Not a lot of turnover as far as guys entering the transfer portal. They did have a lot of guys come in last year, 16 new players. Again, this year I think there's like 15 new players, but a lot on the younger side. And I think it's just our senior leadership is Sammy Sholin and Kruzberger Rosine, and one of those guys is out. So it's even a young leadership core as far as what we're playing with. I think at the beginning of the year I looked at it, and 95% of the team had less than 50 games played with the coaching staff. So I think there's still just a lot of learning the culture and learning what it is to be a Bronco and really building that up. But they seem to be on a good path, and they're playing great hockey right now. So yeah, they're going to be there at the end, and I think they're poised to make another deep run.
It's coming down to the wire in the NCHC standings, and the buzz for the Penrose Cup is in high gear. Do you think that Western does have what it takes to make it back-to-back Penrose Cups?
Based on the 10-game stretch we saw from in January, I certainly do. They had some hiccups. Every team does. It's just a matter of kind of getting the right play at the right time and capitalizing on mistakes when the other team makes them. If they can keep North Dakota in touch, within reach, where they seem to be at now, it could very well come down to that final weekend at Lawson, and it could be the two teams where Western captured it last year. It could be Western and North Dakota playing for it once again at Lawson, and it's just a matter of making the best of your opportunities and everybody buying in at the right time. So I definitely think they're capable of it, but North Dakota is playing ridiculous right now, and their freshman goaltender is playing really good too. And the thing for them is they're getting healthy at the right time, and Western's still kind of bitten by that injury bug, and they had to bring up a young defenseman from the USHL who's stepped in and played pretty well. They get one guy back and another guy goes out with an injury. It's almost a revolving door sometimes. Cole Spicer gets hurt, comes back, and I think it's Slies is now had a slight injury. So just switching guys in and out, next man up mentality, but it's just playing the right way, and when they play their best hockey, I think they're a tough team to beat still.
Well, especially the brief Arizona State Sun Devil. You talked about the injury bug. We'll flip over to ASU here for a little bit. Both Colin Potter and Jack Beck out for the season, and really just licking their wounds and trying to make the best out of this season, coming off of last year's second place finish. Long has been made mention of how desperate teams playing at the end of the season can be the undoing for teams towards the top of the standings. So that being said, what's one of the things that you are watching out for from Arizona State this season, or this weekend? Sorry.
How well they can transition. I think if Miami showed if you can get behind the Western defenseman, that's still kind of a little bit of a liability there. That was how Miami scored their 4 goals. They were all pretty much 2-on-1s. Was it 2 or 3 on Friday, including the overtime one, and then the lone goal they scored on Saturday was another 2-on-1. So really just capitalizing on those opportunities that present themselves. Western's gotten into a bit of drawing penalties or taking poor penalties, but number one team in the country as far as PK goes. But they'll give up some opportunities here and there, and Hampton's been known to let in a goal or two a night. So there's opportunities there. But I would really say that the big thing that if Arizona can press the transition game and Western gets a little bit too caught up being offensive, that's where they're going to get their opportunities the most at, I think.
Yeah, and Wes, on that note too, I mean, you talked earlier about, the secret to beating Western is not letting them get to 4 or more goals. Arizona State's given up the most goals in the conference so far this season. Doesn't really look like it's something that would fit into their wheelhouse given the play that they've had recently. But you also talked before we actually got on about just the not necessarily fear, but the threat of a desperate team like Arizona State with the season kind of winding down and facing the harsh reality of how this year's gone. Does that add more unpredictability going into this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, you look at your roster. There's a lot of guys who are fighting for opportunities and got opportunities due to the injuries you guys have suffered. Plus, you guys kind of leaving in the middle of the season. A lot of transition there for you guys, but I think it gives opportunities to young players who want to put their name on the season, who want to say like, yeah, I came in and I got this limited opportunity, but keep me here, give me a reason to stay a Sun Devil, and we'll see what we can do next year. It's a growing opportunity for the team as a whole, and I think when you get guys who are understanding like this season may not be what we wanted it to be, but there's still opportunities here to get our name out there, to put good tape out. And when you have a team that's a top ranked team in the country, like rankings don't matter when that puck drops. Everybody's on the same ice and everybody's got the same opportunity to score goals or make blocks or do something that stands out. So desperate teams, I think, are willing to sell out a little more and they'll buy in a little bit more to the team, and they're always a danger. And you can't overwrite any team, especially in this conference. And I think Western kind of got caught a little bit, one, due to the fact that a lot of guys were sick last year, but also just, the new kid on the block. What can they really show us? And they were an unknown enemy. They're a known enemy this year to a certain degree, but once again, with all new different players, like how can you adjust and make the right calls and play the right way? So definitely still got to keep in mind that there's a game to be played, and if one team is supposed to be considered the better team, then they better go show it on the ice, because those guys don't care on the other side.
You talk about young players who have really gotten their opportunity to make their mark. One player for Arizona State that has really taken advantage of that in recent weeks is Sam Alfano. Unfortunately, just had a 6-game point streak and last Saturday against St. Cloud State. But one potential matchup that I'm interested in seeing is how the bigger, more physical Alfano at 6'4" goes up against a 6'5" defenseman in Theo Wahlberg. Not necessarily a physical bruising defender himself, but very effective with his reach, very strong at disrupting passing lanes and really keeping play to the outside. And what's the message for the Western Michigan defense going up against a player like Alfano?
I think just stick with your game plan. We know that, Western, like I said, they like to get to the offensive side. They really want to stay out of their own defensive end. But when they're in it, it's, keep guys to the outside, pin them up against the wall, make smart plays, and really just get those passes to the neutral zone at least. Like, if you can catch Western deep in their zone, like you can really waste some time and hang out in there a little bit. They're geared towards transition and offense, but they also they have a good game plan, and it's just be a great teammate, be defensively responsible for your zone or your responsibility for your guy, and make the right decisions and think as a team instead of it doesn't have to be one-on-one defense the whole time. So that's what I would kind of go with, is play a solid team defense.
All right, you guys got anything else for Wes?
I do want to say something here. We do know Braxton Whitehead, forward's going to be out another series that's anticipated. Got Tucker Ness at fourth line center once again. I don't know about you two, or I guess you three, about what do you think that brings to the Arizona State offense against a Western Michigan team, which I do believe is one of the bigger teams out there?
I'll lead off on this one. I think it brings it definitely brings the more physical edge that you want to see out of Arizona State. For those of us who are actually on the ASU side of this weekend, but you want to see this team establish a strong forecheck and establish strong play, getting through the neutral zone into the offensive zone. Tucker's been able to show in the past that he's able to jump up into the play, not necessarily always getting on the score sheet, though he has found the back of the net a couple times this season. But what he's more known for is just kind of clearing the path almost and opening up the ice for everybody else around him. So if he's able to maintain that physical presence and open up space for his line mates to make their plays, I think that's really what Ness at fourth line center brings to the Sun Devils.
Yeah, I mean, Western's had a little bit of difficulty with more aggressive teams. They haven't been quite the same heavy team that they've been in years past. I think Miami was actually did a pretty good job of bullying guys around, especially their forwards on our defensemen in their own zone. That seemed to be a spot that led to quite a bit of the transition play there. So if you can put that same kind of pressure on our D-men, and you're willing to kind of sell out a little bit on plays close to the blue line, it could really open up and be physical in those areas. I think it could really be beneficial to ASU there. But there's also a lot of quick passes that are coming out of the Western zone and guys who can carry the puck too. So I mean, it's a double-edged sword. What are you willing to risk for a potential play, and just knowing the right opportunities to make those plays. But there has been a little bit of, I would say last year's team was definitely a lot heavier play than this year's team. And Miami did a decent job of bullying our guys around last weekend. I think if you go back and watch that series, you'll see that a little bit.
Yeah, bullying is really not something that I've seen Arizona State be able to accomplish much of this season. But like we've said, a desperate team could really throw a wrench into things and make the make the standings coming down to the wire a little bit spicier.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important this year. Everything's on home ice if you're one of those top teams. So, everyone's going to want to come down and battle. You're not getting. There's no free passes in the NCHC. Whether it's, we don't do bye weekends. Really, the only team that you don't want to be is that 9th place team because they don't play. But really, you want to be one of those top 2 teams. You want to be where North Dakota and Denver are sitting right now because you're guaranteed home ice throughout. Unless you're, it's a 1-2 matchup for the conference tournament finals. But yeah, everyone's going to want to compete. Everybody's really close. I think this might be, of the 2 halves, one of the closer years that we've had, especially the middle pack there. It's, you're still 7 points out of 5th place, 4th, 11 out of, or 9 out of 4th place. So, I mean, home ice is still potentially right there, but I mean, it's a tough climb, and you'd have to almost win out. But, we've seen weirder things in this conference for sure. I mean,
you're saying there's a chance.
There's always a chance for sure. I mean, we've seen a 1-win conference schedule out of one of these teams in the past, and a no-win conference schedule out of one of these teams in the past. So, I mean, it's an interesting conference that has produced a lot of oddness. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have paid attention before you guys were in the conference, but you don't necessarily have to win the Penrose to go far coming out of this conference. Plenty of our tournament teams have won either the Penrose or the conference tournament at the end of the year and gone on to a national championship run. There's only one team to win all 3 in the same season. 2 teams have won the regular season and the conference championship in the same year. One of them we don't really count because it was the COVID year, and the other one did it last year. But St. Cloud and Minnesota Duluth have both come out of the 4th, 5th spot to win the conference tournament and make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. So I wouldn't count yourselves out of it yet, and just know that we play a different brand of hockey that produces championships in the NCHC.
Well, and last year was certainly an outlier with only 2 NCHC teams making the tournament, but the pedigree of the conference, both of those teams did eventually make it to the Frozen Four. What really stood out to me so far at this point is the separation that is growing in between the top 3 teams and then that next middle pack. I'm going to lump Western Michigan into that top pack because having 2 games in hand over Denver and sitting only 5 points back in the standings, there's a lot of ground to be made up quickly over the Pioneers.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely still some opportunities. I thought going into the last couple of weekends, Western's in a really good spot to kind of make a run here. They did get tripped up a little bit by Miami, but they're facing teams that they either have a really good record against or teams that seem to be struggling with injuries or just downplay from previous years. Definitely in a good spot. Still, I think again, you mentioned ASU not having the year that they had last year. I think that plays into Western's benefit. They go and they play at Colorado College, where they've been extremely successful since going to Ed Robeson Arena. I think they have one loss, and it was an overtime loss in that building last year. Cam Rowe went undefeated in his 3 seasons with Western Michigan playing there. For whatever reason, they play really good in Colorado at elevation. I don't know what it is. They swept Denver in Denver after letting Denver sweep here. But I think a lot of things play into Western's hand, but Western controls its own destiny. What can you do? Can you get guys to be healthy, stay healthy? Can you keep that offensive production from top to bottom going? Can you run 4 lines game after game? And can Hampton stay consistent and keep battling the way he's battled the last few games? And it's nice to get a 10-win streak in the middle of the season, but I think this is when you kind of start seeing Minnesota Duluth teams of the past. Like, this is where they will kick it in, or this is where Denver would kick it in, North Dakota would kick it in. Teams that with that pedigree know when to win and when to really turn it up and start pushing. So can Western be a team that does that and goes on a run like they did last year with ripping off 10 straight at the end of the year? So in a good spot. Don't necessarily have to win the conference to earn a shot in the big tournament at the end, but you want to build off of a good end to your conference schedule.
Well, unless anybody else has anything, I'd like to just wrap it up with a roundtable of what the predicted outcome for the weekend is.
I'll start off.
Go ahead.
I'll start off here. I'm gonna predict 2 Western Michigan wins. First game Friday night, we'll say 5-2. Arizona State's gonna allow 47 shots on net, because that's what the Sun Devils like to do against these really good teams. Saturday night is going to be a little closer, 3-2, where Arizona State only allows like 39 shots on net. But that's one of the big takeaways for me, is just allowing way too many shots on net, because if you allow shots on net, opposing teams are going to score goals.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what bit Omaha the last couple of seasons. They have a great goaltender in Simon Latkozy, but I think it was the end, near the middle part to the end of the year, about this time last year, their defensive strategy was just let Simon see the puck. We don't care if shots are getting on to him, just let him see the puck. He'll make more saves than he allows goals. But it was not a recipe for winning a lot of games, seeing nearly 50 shots a game for even one of the better goaltenders. But Omaha kind of did the, you fans, man. I'm hearing the same thing from you guys that I heard from Omaha when we had to play Omaha. Like, oh, you guys are going to just walk right over us, walk right through us. Those were 2 battles for sure. Omaha came in here and played tough, won a game. Again, I don't want to overlook anybody. I do think that, like I said, desperate teams are dangerous teams if you're going to overlook them. The homer in me, wants to say that it's going to be a sweep for Western, but it's not going to be an easy road. And our team still has to go out there and produce and compete and make all the right decisions to steal 6 points. But the NCHC is one of those conferences, like I said, anybody can win at any time. But I do think my heart and my brain do say that it's a Western sweep. Even though they've been a little bit of home dogs the last couple of seasons, losing more games at home than they have on the road. But they're going to get back at it, and they like the feeling of winning. So I'll give 2 wins to Western for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with the call for the sweep. I think we're all kind of on the same page there. I do agree with Wes that it's not going to be easy, though. I think that this team is. I think Arizona State's going to make it interesting in both games. They're going to keep things close right until the end, and I think they will end up losing by a sizable margin, but it won't really start to fall apart till the end. That's my not so bold prediction.
Yeah, Friday games have typically not been kind to the Sun Devils. I think that will be the easier win for the Broncos. not simply because of that fact, but also because Lawson being as how shall we say, tumultuous an atmosphere from the student section. I think that it will just be something that the Sun Devils really haven't played in front of on an opposing side, and I think that Western will roll a little bit easier to the win on Friday night. But Saturday could be the game where Arizona State can steal at least a point. I could see this game going to overtime, and once it gets to overtime, it honestly could go either way. But I just think with as many pieces as Arizona State is missing, there's not the same strength in the lineup as you have with Cullen Potter and Jack Beck. There simply isn't, and you've seen that with the top line and how Cruz Lucius has been struggling the last few games after having a 6-game point streak himself. It wouldn't shock me to see the Sun Devils come away with a point on Saturday, but it also wouldn't surprise me to see it be a clean 6-point sweep for Western. Well, we want to give our thanks to Wes for jumping on the show and joining us for his perspective on the Western Michigan Broncos. Be sure to check out Wes's podcast on YouTube, Goal Horns and Fight Songs. He and a Minnesota Duluth fan go at it for a couple hours every week and just break down all the action, mostly in the NCHC, but also around college hockey. Wes, thank you again, and hopefully it's a hard-fought series this weekend.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It was great fun. I didn't get a chance to talk to Mike this week, so it was still nice to talk some NCHC hockey, and look forward to the games this weekend, and just hoping for a couple good contests. It's always better when both teams play well.
Absolutely.
No, and thanks for bringing that weather up here. We're warming up a little bit, so I think some of the Arizona weather's coming out. Maybe it'll mean more lunatics in the seats and a better atmosphere.
I'll see if they can put some in the equipment bags since I won't be making the trip up. We'll be back to close out our show here in just a moment.
And thank you again to Wes, the Painted Bronco, for giving us that valuable insight into what awaits Arizona State this weekend. And I, for one, am not looking forward to it at all. I don't know about you guys, but what I am looking forward to is the start of ASU's baseball season coming up this weekend. There was the change this offseason. ASU is one of a few teams to be going all in on baseball when it comes to 34 scholarships on this roster, expanding it with the new changes. And Willie Bloomquist made a big deal about it when it was first announced. He said this is going to be a game changer for us. And then this offseason, he went and had one of the best transfer classes in the nation. They've been picked by both the Big 12 and Baseball America to finish fourth in the conference. They're just outside of the top 25, according to most outlets, including Baseball America. So there's a lot of hype around this season, which can be concerning if you're like me and a Sun Devil fan. But Andrew, what are you really looking forward to in this season? What gives you hope and what makes you a little nervous?
What gives me hope is Muni, and what makes me nervous is kind of a double-edged sword. Muni is a launch pad of a stadium. The offense is going to show up, and there's plenty of guys. Bloomquist is talking about the depth. I'm going to have an article coming out on Devils in Detail just talking about the roster as a whole. There's a lot of depth on offense. I can point to maybe 15 different guys and say, oh yeah, I think you could start and you could be serviceable. He said positions are rented, not owned, which that's something that stuck with me. I do think Dean Toyo is going to be the transfer star on this team, Mountain West Co-Player of the Year last year. He's going to hit double-digit home runs, barring something going very wrong. So that's something I'm really excited about. On the opposite side of the coin, pitching has always been a struggle at Phoenix Municipal Stadium. I do think they've improved their pitching as a whole, But starting pitching, to me in particular, that was the weakness of the team last year, with Ben Jacobs, as the lights are going off and on here. Ben Jacobs and Jack Martinez, along with rotation of guys throughout the back end, being okay, good at best, but not really anything good. You've got Cole Carlone. He's going to be the Friday night starter. Colin Linder on Saturdays. Easton Barrett on Sundays. And then Cole Klecker going to be at Tuesdays just to start out. He might move into a weekend role. Be curious to see how that goes. But pitching, it scares me a little bit just because it's a huge unknown, and I'm not ready to pick up what Bloomquist is picking down with his hopes for the pitching right now. I have to see it to believe it.
Well, Andrew, you mentioned the player that I'm most interested to see how he develops in the early part of the season in Cole Klecker. Hamilton High School product, went off to TCU and transfers back home this offseason. His body of work last season wasn't anything really to write home about. Made 5 starts out of his 10 appearances with an ERA of over 4.5, but 20 strikeouts in 19 1/3 innings. I think he's got the potential to fine tune and become more of a strikeout pitcher. I'd like to see him maybe again, like I said, maybe eventually move into a weekend spot, but this rotation by committee it's recipe for disaster. As a Red Sox fan myself, growing up in 2003 and seeing Grady Little use the closer by committee, it doesn't work. Guys operate best when they know exactly what their role is, and I think the whole concept of positions being rented, not earned, is not the best recipe for success. Maybe Willie Bloomquist knows a little bit more than I do. I would hope he knows a little bit more than I do, and maybe my evaluation is completely off base, to use a baseball pun.
Very nice. Of course, Willie Bloomquist did get a contract extension this offseason as well last year. He took the Sun Devils back to the tournament for the first time since he took over. And, it didn't last very long. They were bounced out pretty quickly, but there does seem to be some positive momentum. Of course, the players he's brought in this offseason, all very highly rated. Everything that we've heard written about them from Baseball America, people like that, are all kind of saying the same thing that we're saying. If the pitching can actually be fixed, watch out. Arizona State could be what they have been historically.
I just want to close out with if a good measuring stick on the season. If the Sun Devils can get to a regional final, I think that it's definitely a step in the right direction for Willie Bloomquist, and bodes well for going down the line.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's got to be the minimum this year to feel like we're really heading in the right direction. But season's about to start, and we'll be able to learn a little bit more about this team, especially its pitching staff, in the next week or so, and that will give us plenty more to talk about next week on the show. I'm really excited for it. I'm looking forward to it. So until next week, for Andrew Hazlett, for Tom Harden, I'm David Howman signing off for Echo from the Buttes. And as always, give 'em hell, Devils.